And then remember, just click stop recording.
Cool.
Awesome.
Frank, if we just start screaming, come and running. He's like,
He
eat it.
He needs a safe word in case I go on a tangent.
Wilma. All right, we'll start with a laugh and we'll leave with a laugh, I hope, like George Costanza. So welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Corner with Kevin Krueger. I'm your host and coach here in Miami's Coconut Grove at the Nucleus Hub with my second guest, might post first, Peter Zalewski, longtime Miami resident and business leader. I'm eager to have a conversation with Peter on both Coconut Grove, where next week you have a condo walking tour, and then, of course, the macroeconomics that we see in Florida, the country, the world, on a little political skew, which most people don't really want to dip our toe in the water. But Peter comes with a great background as a business journalist, and he'll tell us more about that. Moving forward, Peter Zalewski, welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Corner.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks for having me on. I'm impressed. You know, I've been going through the Grove for quite some time. This is my first time actually coming into an office in the Coconut Grove. So you found a great spot, great studio, and I'm excited to sort of talk about what's going on in the market.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you mentioned your first time coming into a Coconut Grove office, which there's, of course, down the street, there's Tiger Tail,
yes,
which has a number of offices. And then there's the Coco Walk, has a few, is a little mixed retail space. But Coconut Grove is within city of Miami limits, and it's a wonderful neighborhood with a rich history. You'll probably share a bit about. The office market is small, and it is going to grow. It's going to have to grow. Probably some boutique offices versus like the national headquarters you might find in a Manhattan or a Brickell, Miami, with 20,000 foot floor plates. But the affluent have descended upon Coconut Grove for lifestyle, in particular this decade, the past 5 years, and they want to live in that 15-minute or 5-minute walking city, which the Grove is small enough to do that. And I was at a Ackerman law firm real estate summit yesterday, and Coconut Grove came up 3 times. This small little city across different industries, residential and office development and mixed use, retail. And I'm anticipating a little more office build out in Coconut Grove, whereas it's so tight and small and expensive now. There's like a 2% vacancy rate here. So welcome to the Nucleus Hub, which we did a little brief tour. It's about a 3,000 square foot building. And the property owner built this about 3 years ago. And Nucleus Hub, for those that don't know, it's not just podcast studio, but like co-working, lobby, library, and then there's a couple small offices for lease. It's a great community. So thank you, Nucleus Hub, for hosting us. And there's a little intro to our podcast hosts and production team here. So tell us a little bit more about Coconut Grove, the rich history that you know about in 90 seconds or so.
90 seconds or so. Okay, so first of all, I know about condos and I know about the business world. I was a journalist for 13 years. Afterwards, I wrote a column for the Miami Herald as well as the Real Deal. And what I do is I look at the condo market. One of the things to look at the condo market, you got to look at the history. You got to look at the history of everything. So if you want to fast forward of history of Coconut Grove, it started off with people with money who were sea or water oriented. It then morphed into an era in the 80s, which was cocaine based. You had
the sea-oriented
in terms of smuggling. Smuggling right. In the 80s.
Are we talking 120 years ago? Or are we talking in the 40s, 50s?
We're talking like the end of the 19th century. So right. you had sailor-oriented type of people coming in here. So you went from that. So the water's always sort of been a
maritime industry, which
recreational.
I happen to be wearing my Propeller Club pin, which is a national organization of maritime industry.
Yes.
But even so, can't forget about the Bahamians. That's the first thing that should come to mind.
Well, I was giving people sort of an overall theme about what was going on. Remember, we had shrimpers here. They used to live off what they called live off the hook. Live off the hook was when you would set up your own mooring, if you will, out in the middle of anywhere. You didn't have to pay anything. When I first got to Miami in 1993, one of my buddies like, listen, just live off the hook. We'll set it up. You buy yourself a cheap sailboat. You get yourself a membership over on 27th and Coral Way at the Miracle Center. You shower there. You live here. It's not going to cost you anything. Right. So this has always sort of been the Grove mentality. If anybody is a big fan of the 60s music, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Well, one of them was actually down here partying and everything was going crazy in San Francisco. So he left Coconut Grove. He went over there to sort of play it. So, Coconut Grove is one of these markets that's very bohemian-esque, if you will.
Bohemian, not Bahamian.
Yeah. Well, it's probably both of them.
Yes.
It's both of them. But it's also a place where there was a segregation line. There was
Well,
a
we
wall.
just had the Coconut Grove Arts Festival here, speaking of Bohemian.
Correct.
So so continue.
Yeah,
The line.
Yeah, so you had a
Miami.
line from everything I've read
Throughout Miami.
but there was an ordinance that said that effectively African Americans or black, because you had a lot of Bahamians
Black
here.
Caribbean.
Yeah. They had to be close to these estates they were working at, but at the same point they couldn't live within them. A little bit of trivia, supposedly, and I'm throwing this out there, this might be urban legend, but there's a Michael Jackson video called Thriller in which there's a scene in the cemetery, and supposedly that was a cemetery down here in Coconut Grove off of Grant. So
Get out of here.
you got all kinds of history, all kinds of things going on. And where is it today? Well, basically it's maintained its vibe, its feel, old growth trees, plenty of coverage, no beach. This is a let's call it a rocky bottom. So if you're boater oriented, you're coming to the Grove, and from here it's just sort of spread out around. A lot of people seek out this area. They love this area. It's got a cool vibe to it. It's a lot of it's been maintained as what it used to be back in the day, and it continues to thrive. Although it goes through booms and busts. Right now we're going through a boom, because everybody primarily from Silicon Valley and or Wall Street, they all want to be down here. A lot of great schools, expensive schools for their kids, but a lot of schools are here. So everybody's congregating until the next wave. And at some point, they'll move on and the Grove will go through the challenges it faced in the late 90s when all of a sudden everybody was poaching away their clientele. So we always go through these booms and busts. I've been here since 93, and you see these cycles. So right now you're very positive on Coconut Grove, but it changes. It always changes.
Right. So when you say expensive schools, we're talking about the private high schools.
Or grade schools.
Right. And of course they're going to
40 grand, 50 grand a year. To
Name
send
a
your kid to
couple
school.
of those famous schools, rather famous schools.
I'm not a school expert.
Is
The
it
ones
Ransom Everglades?
yeah, you
here,
always hear about
or-
Ransom Everglades. You
And
hear
what's
about
the other one up the street?
I'm getting jammed up.
Or not. But schools are an issue. And that came up yesterday.
It always
at
comes up.
the real estate summit. Because as these C-level billionaires and multi-millionaires descend upon this city of Miami, which is, Florida's famous for its retirees who didn't need schools. But now we've got University of Florida as a top-ranked public institution, university. And then you've got a need to place, young students into the good schools that these New Yorkers, Connecticut, California are accustomed to, back where there was like an ecosystem of academia. So that'll be interesting. And it's certainly something that needs to happen within our commercial real estate world. How and where do you find the acreage to build out a proper, Cambridge Institute type of Ivy League feel, or a modern day school system that's like urban? So, topic for another time, and maybe we'll bring on another expert. Tell us a bit about your Coconut Grove condo walk that's coming forth, and the general condo market in the U.S. and in South Florida in particular.
So since 2013, I've been taking people on tours, condo tours. And what we do is we basically go out there. I explain to them the history. I explain to them the different buildings. I teach them how to analyze a condo. I say you find a building, you don't find a unit. Once you find the buildings that make sense, then you kind of drill down and you focus on the units that make sense. In South Florida, there's about 13,000 associations, 610,000 units. It's way too much to look for. So what you need to do is you need to put yourself in the mind of somebody on Tinder or Grindr, depending on what you're into. Put yourself on Tinder and you're swiping left for stuff you don't like. And whatever you got left, that's kind of what you got to work with. So what we do on the tours, we spend about 3 hours, walk at a moderate pace, travel about 4 miles or so, have stops along the way. I teach people how to analyze a building. A lot of stuff you can see right off the bat, and it'll tell you about a building. For instance, what's its balcony like? Is there surface parking? Have the palm trees been installed on the 8th floor where you're going to have your swimming pool? There's all these little tells, and then you dig into the data. And what you're able to do is you're able to figure out. So for instance, if you're out with a realtor one day and then you guys go and you have lunch to sort of discuss what you're seeing, I'm giving people tips how to figure out which one should they focus their time on and actually do the due diligence and get the brain damage, and which one should they simply take a pass on. So that's what we do on the tour. We're going to be doing the Coconut Grove tour. First time ever. Haven't done a Coconut Grove condo. We call it.
I don't recall seeing that on your newsletter. The newsletter is?
I've been putting out a newsletter since 2007. It's called the Miami Condo Market Intelligence Report.
Miami Condo Market Intelligence Report.
You've been putting out since 2007.
Broadcast through the Condo Vultures Substack or
no. I run everything through MiamiCondo.club. I set up a club called Miami Condo Investing Club, trying to build a community for those people who are interested in condos.
Tell them, not me.
Yeah. So, but your camera
I missed
people are
last night.
Your camera people are good enough. They'll be able to figure out like which angle or
the camera people. The one camera. So Peter and his residential broker partner, Jenny Huertas, right, hosted one of your monthly meetups last night in downtown Miami to follow up. Did you do Coral Gables last Saturday, right?
Yeah, as part of the club.
You've done Brickell recently.
Yeah.
So you met at Craft Restaurant across from the Miami Heat basketball arena. And how did it go last night?
It was good. It was good.
You get a dozen to 3 dozen guests.
Yeah, typically last night was like maybe, I don't know, 10 people or so.
Great. You get an intimate conversation with small groups.
It's about the building the community for the condos. See, what everybody needs to realize, if they come to South Florida and they haven't played here before, everybody is on the sell side. Everybody is eating what they kill. Therefore, you're only going to hear positive information because why? Developers need to sell stuff. Therefore, everybody who's out there, they're almost like they're out there spreading the gospel or the word of whoever that particular developer is. So what we do is we kind of take a journalistic approach at it, and we call out the BS and we compliment the stuff that's doing well. And that tends to turn people in a bad way, especially in a market like today where we're in great transition. At least on the condo side. So I can be a lightning rod. I can be very polarizing, but it's something I embrace. I was a journalist for a long time. I had big attorneys coming at me, threatening me to sue me for this and that.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. So
let's talk about your journalistic career. It's about 15 years running.
I did it for
94, 5.
Yeah, I did it.
University of Miami alum.
No.
I mean, University of Missouri alum.
Missouri. Yeah, I went to Missouri. After Missouri, I got
Chicago native.
Yep. I was working up in Minneapolis 6 months of the day. I got the hell out of there and I moved down to Miami because I figured if I'm a journalist, I'm going to be poor. I'd rather be poor with nice weather than poor in Minneapolis and freezing. Right. So been down in Miami since 1993. I had a period for about 18 months, 2 years where I was working in Australia. I got a skilled labor visa.
Really?
Yeah, I worked in Australia. I did all kinds of things. I worked on...
what labor do you have skill in, Peter?
Oh, well...
Besides writing and speaking.
Well, listen, the most dangerous people in the world are journalists and former journalists because they know how to find stuff. Yeah, they know how to find stuff that people do not. So all those great stories you see are like, oh, how did they figure out that story? So it kind of makes you interesting. But interesting story about Australia.
What were you doing down under?
I did everything from working for the largest bank in Australia called ANZ to picking bananas.
What?
I made a bunch of cash, and what I would do is I would move. I kept moving. I lived in Perth on the Indian Ocean. I lived in like they say there, Sydney. I lived in Tasmania. I lived in Queensland, where the Great Barrier Reef is. I was all over. So what I would do is I would basically 3 months, I'd make money, and then I'd piss off, and I'd go do something else. And I was in Queensland, which is Northeast Coast on the Great Barrier Reef.
New Zealand.
I said, you know what? Screw it. Let me go.
Australia.
Yeah, Australia. Queenstown is in South Island of New Zealand. Yeah, I was there bunch of times.
I'll pretend like I know.
Yeah. But basically, I said, screw it. And I was picking bananas. So I went through the process of showing up at 8 a.m. at the only stoplight in town. And guys would come rolling in with what they call a ute, which we call it like a pickup truck. They call it a ute. It's called a utility vehicle.
Right.
And they would pick
Vinny.
Yeah, they would pick which a person they wanted. You have to get in the back of it.
Sounds so similar, does it not? Home Depot Coral Way.
That's 100% what it was. And you know what the kicker was? You'd get paid every Friday in this small little town, and everybody would say they were there making money, and then they were going to move on. Friday night they'd go on a bender, and by Monday they were back in line trying to get work because they pissed away all their cash.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you got out of there. You came back to America.
Yeah,
and you got back into journalism.
I came back.
And we're going to touch on some of these topics as I challenge you and I challenge my audience to touch on the hot button topics of politics, which is a major issue and attraction to the free state of Florida that's booming in the last 5 years, partly due to its political climate, and it's open for business and so on. But you mentioned Minneapolis. And so with journalism, what was your focus? You said international trade, and what other issues?
Yeah. So
15-year run.
initially, the reason I got into journalism is that I love baseball. Baseball is all about stats and analytics.
That makes two of us.
Yep. So if you ever meet a banker and you don't know what to have a conversation about, bring up baseball. Most bankers tend to like baseball. It's the analytical part. It's the ratios.
It's very
things like that.
stat-driven.
Yeah.
So that's a good point.
Yeah. So at the time there were newspapers. There was hard copy. You'd actually pick it up.
You read the lineup score, the box scores.
Exactly. You'd get 3 a day, or you'd read 3, 4, 5 newspapers a day before everything went to the phone. So I got into that, and I realized the only way to be in a big city was to cover business, because no journalist likes business. So it was easy. And now what I did is I looked at business as if these were teams. So the CEO is like a head coach type of situation.
Sounds familiar, does it not?
And if you
commercial real estate head coach Kev.
Yeah, exactly. So if you take that perspective,
I try to treat business like sports as well.
That's exactly what it is. You figure out each team's niche. You figure out a developer's niche. What do? They run the same offense. They run the same defense. They place the players in a certain spot. They have a certain, on a 3-0 count. Do they have to swing? Can they go ahead and swing, or they have to sit back and just sort of take a pitch? It's all exactly the same. So I got into that, and I loved condos because condos were commodities. It's a salty snack. It's orange juice. It's coffee. All this stuff. Now they're going to give you a bunch of shiny objects and smoke and mirrors and talk about what it is. At the end of the day, it's rebar, it's concrete. And maybe they pay to get some brand put on there under a licensing agreement.
Lately, yes, especially in Miami.
It's all just a commodity. You go into a house, that's a work of art. What's the shape of the lot? Where's the tree? Does it puddle? What is the walking distance here? A condo, it's a commodity. I've done pricing for developers who price out these condos. It's just math. You don't even, in fact, listen, if you're buying a condo, you don't even need to go to the location, because you can figure it all out, because it's all the same.
And there's a lot of that in Miami, sight unseen purchasing.
Well, but in Miami, you need to make sure you show up, because there's so many scammers.
Well, and we're hearing buzz about that. 300 Biscayne Boulevard's Aston Martin is under. You read?
There's lawsuits every single time a developer comes online. They then turn over the power, and it's par for the course. They bring in experts. Once the association has control, they bring in experts. They find stuff. They sue.
Right. Okay.
At the end of the day, the professional service people on both sides, of which I'm an expert witness, not on that case, but I'm an expert witness. The only people making the money are expert witnesses. There's going to be a settlement. It will not go to a jury. They'll piss away all this cash.
Interesting.
And at the end of the day, they're going to have to hit everybody with a special assessment. Get it done.
Including like the television news, which says something, not just like the Real Deal or whomever else. So
that's to put pressure. That's to put pressure on the developer. Try to salvage their reputation.
Great point.
That's all it is. This is not anything new. This always, and will continue to always happen.
Well, I'm leaning into development the last couple of years, serving a few on site selection, usually land to build up. I was redirected last summer when the capital financing had started drying up the last 2 years with presidential election and tariffs and wars and interest rates, and that $1 million limited partnership could be spent on something else. It could just be a CD, and rather than getting tied up in some real estate developer. So I'm learning a lot about that, and I'm all ears if someone wants to share, and whether you come on board here or meet me here. So thank you for those insights. I wouldn't have thought of that. I came across you 5 years ago, I'd say.
Okay.
And then I did your Edgewater Wynwood walking tour 2 years ago because I wanted to co-opt your concept and do office walking tours in Brickell. And I haven't yet done that yet, but we'll get around to it one of these days. And then I took it again this past January, a month ago, because that developer I'm serving, we negotiated 18 months ago on a property. We're still looking at it. That's how long these things can take. And it's interesting because the listing broker's the financial analyst, young gent, was on the tour as well. And I say, hey, if we can get under 20 million, we can start talking. A lot of these landowners are overpricing their properties due to call it local politics again, state of Florida, to present more affordable housing options. And it doesn't have to be affordable housing, it should be market rate, what have you, but you're permitted to go up through the Live Local Act. And Miami's on the Isthmus, 10 miles between the Bay and the Everglades. You can really mostly go up as opposed to other cities. That's why you see the skyscraper on this book here. But, I came across you again last year when we reconnected for a sit down with an office developer. And in doing my research on Peter as my guest last January for this real estate debate,
Bulls versus Bears.
Bulls versus Bears. Who do you think the bear was? Ladies, you can choose Peter Z. He is taken, by the way.
And I went into the Lion's Den because I went into the Chamber of Commerce, which is a factory
in Miami Beach,
a factory of optimism.
There's
generally speaking, went into the Chamber of Commerce headquarters, and I had a discussion with
everyone loved it. Peter came with the stats, but yes, it was a buy, sell, hold concept, because sometimes the best thing to do is not invest, not build. Don't go to build that business or what have you. So really interesting. But with your background and my research, I came across a young Peter Zalewski on
younger.
Yes, true. He's got that youthful spirit regardless. Michael Moore's documentary on American Capitalism? What's it called?
Capitalism, a Love Story.
Capitalism, a Love Story, which I think I found on YouTube or Amazon, whatever. It's out there. And post-mortgage crisis 2008, I think it was a 2011 production. Peter claims he likes the commoditization of condos because he gets to be transactional. Back then, when the mortgage crisis created underwater situations, you got your bears out buying. You buy low, you sell high. Tell us about that era and the political climate and everything going on, and you're switching from business journalism to, I'm going to go transact and collect commissions.
So I grew up in a family that did real estate. They were neophytes. They would get into there. They would buy something. If the numbers make sense, they would rehab it and they'd rent it out. And they did very well up in Chicago. They got into an area, ultimately ended up really regentrifying and taking off, and they cashed in. They then went to Asheville, North Carolina, another market which blew up.
It's a hot market, right?
Yeah.
Last decade.
So, I've kind of been around real estate. So I was in journalism, and I'll never forget, I was in, this is probably about 2004, 2005. I was covering banking. And what always happened is George Perez of the Related Group. He's the most prolific vertical condo developer in South
Local
Florida.
Miami developer, now part of Inter Miami Soccer too, correct? That George Perez or Perez Art Museum?
Well, Perez Art Museum is named after him. Yeah, but he was a gentleman who was not to be confused with Stephen Ross's related companies.
Dolphins.
Yeah. So George Perez is this prolific vertical condo developer, and
I'm thinking of George Mass.
Right? Jorge Mas. Yeah.
Jorge Mas. is Inter Miami.
So George Perez, wherever he went, there was a bank called Wachovia.
Yep.
And the reason you don't hear about it anymore is they got shut down by the feds.
That's right.
So wherever George Perez was building in Miami-Dade County, Wachovia was always financing it. So there's a project going up on Flagler and Biscayne Boulevard.
And Flagler Street is our Meridian line across
north-south.
the county.
Correct. So I see that there's a bank out of Chicago that's financing George Perez in Miami-Dade County. And the bank president is very good friends with George Perez. They always, typically when you get into condos, you can bet though. Think about it as if you were a degenerate gambler. And I know a lot of them. When you go to the horse track, you bet the number because it's your lucky number. You bet the horse because it looks good, or you bet the jockey because the jockey knows how to get it over the finish line. So typically what a banker will do is bet the jockey. They always bet the jockey. So this was an example where suddenly Related was putting up a project called 50 Biscayne. Wachovia, which doesn't exist anymore. They got shut by the feds.
Mm-hmm.
Wachovia ultimately decided not to finance the construction. And the property was about 3 blocks from where the headquarters was for Wachovia. So I give the banker a call, what's sort of going on here? Well, listen, we got so much money tied up. When local bankers start to turn off the spigot and they dump it to out-of-towners who supposedly know better, you know the game is over. This is a hustle they've been running here since the 1920s. We're celebrating the peak of the 1920s Florida land boom. It happened about January the 10th of 1926. That was the peak of the boom based on a symbolic moment. Ultimately, it was over by September of 1926, because there was a hurricane, great hurricane of Miami. So there's symbolic points. So at that moment,
by the way, 26, this is the 100th anniversary.
Yes.
Of a lot of Coral
A
Gables,
lot, all of it.
University
Yep.
Miami. And
Yep.
so, well, there's a couple years out. But.
So I was putting together a piece, and after Wachovia would not finance George Perez with his 50 Biscayne condo project on Flagler in Biscayne, and he had to go to an out-of-town institution, I knew the jig was up. I knew if local lenders who understand it, if they're not dipping their toe in the water, I don't want to either. And this is always how the hustle works. The out-of-towners come in here, they end up getting fleeced because they bring their school of thought and they apply it here. When the market craps out, guess who buys it back? The locals. So always watch the locals. If the locals are going forward and buying, you need to be buying. If they're selling, you need to be selling. And that basically triggered me to start taking a look at the condo market. And at the time, you didn't have big data. You didn't have the Palantirs of the world. You didn't have Snowflake of the world. You didn't have these software companies. So I was just doing it old school journalistic style, going through public records, put together hit lists of all the different buildings, what was sold, what was unsold. And because I had the real estate license, I never practiced, but I got it in order to cover about real estate. I broke out. I set up a company called Condo Vultures. A guy called Michael Moore does documentaries about how the market went to shit and about how capitalists were taking advantage of it. I set up a buy-side brokerage to go in basically and take advantage of speculators. Didn't know what the hell they were doing. And these are speculators. They weren't looking to make cash flow. They were looking to buy low and sell high. And ultimately what they ended up doing was buying high and selling low. So came up with a company called Condo Vultures, got a lot of attention all over. Doesn't matter if it was Wall Street Journal, The Economist, whatever the case may be.
Right.
And people came to me for the data. It was Wall Street. It was private equity, family office, universities. Do you know that they have, for part of their endowment funds, they actually spend money buying distressed real estate. Hospitals
I've seen
buy distressed real estate. So there might be a face that says, "Oh, this is a great institution." Let me tell you what, they carve out some cash, and when the market goes to hell, they are locked and loaded, ready to take down this type of stuff. So that was kind of the reality. That's kind of how Michael Moore got to me, because I was a very outspoken.
You were already published.
Yeah, I was already published.
He found you, not the other way around.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. No. I've never hired a public relations firm in my life. I've been quoted over 2,000 times.
And man, that Vultures branding is that's in your face. Most people don't want to look at a vulture or think that they're getting the bones picked on their family home, their condo, or their starter, or what have you. But it's a reality, and there's bears, there's bulls, etc. And whether it's stock market or other stuff. And amazing applause.
Thank you.
So, yeah. So I have the apple here because we're learning from Professor Peter. And speaking of professors, I have a book from the provost at my alma mater, Babson. I got an MBA there, and they have a campus in Brickell now, which is a small business school outside of Boston. And one of my first introduction to, I'll just admit, Latinas. There's a high percentage of South Americans that were in my master's program then. And when I moved here, I didn't know a street nor a soul. I knew my cousin Keith that, shout out at Rise Realty. And that's it. I didn't, and as I mentioned, Flagler Street is the meridian that crosses from the Bay to the Everglades, that 10 miles, and everything north and south. And I'm still figuring out my way around this city. It's laid out like a grid, but it's, I'm accustomed to old Boston, which is laid out like cow paths. But this professor written this book 2 years ago on emerging global cities. And I got my autographed copy from our Brickell campus at Babson. And the 3 cities that I quizzed you before you walked in, you hadn't seen this book yet. You'll read it. I'll get you a copy at some point. Dubai, Singapore, and Miami, which I argue is the capital of the Western Hemisphere, if not beyond, because our country of America is about to celebrate its 250th anniversary of its founding, of the Declaration of Independence, 1776. And what, to me, I recognized finally 4 or 5 years ago, what's so important about that declaration of freedom of religion, freedom of speech, it's the first time in human history that an individual had the right to pursue happiness, whether you're Henry David Thoreau counting ants in Walden Pond, where my mom used to love to go walk, and or go off and become a billionaire, and everything in between. And our state of Florida 5 years ago was one of the first and few that refused to succumb to, let's call it the COVID lockdown, for a number of reasons. Keep the children in school. The governor, I don't know what your politics are. I hear some of it, but I'm a registered independent. I don't really trust politicians too much. My politics is my business personally, and then I try to put out good into the world as best I can. But our governor DeSantis, thankfully won. I'd say thankfully, because otherwise we'd be a duplicate of New York. If we had our Tallahassee mayor in office, would have fallen right in line with the rest of the Democrat Party. And those that don't remember their history from 7 years ago, that Tallahassee mayor lost by a couple of points. It's 52% to 49 or something like that. Is it Matthew right? Anyway, it was a couple of points. And some of that was probably because he was caught with crack and a hooker in a hotel room 2 weeks beforehand. We're going to keep it real, but people forget, and I don't. So if it goes back 250 years, and being from Boston, where I know the value of St. Patrick's Day is coming right up. This is in case I had to hide my face on Peter's conversation, but I mentioned this last night to the Affordable Housing Board of Advisors at Miami Beach, where I'm going to sit on their board now. And upon moving here 9 years ago and being vastly underwhelmed by the St. Patrick's Day experience, the reason why it's so big in Boston and some of the other countries, especially Boston, is because, and you might not know this, it's called Evacuation Day in Boston. That's related to the Revolutionary War, when George Washington successfully kicked out the Brits, had to go to Nova Scotia. Do you know some of this history?
No.
So the Brits on March 17th, 1775, had to evacuate when George Washington overnight planted cannons up on a hill in Dorchester and had the British cornered. They had no defense on that overnight move. And so March 17th, they're on ships heading to Canada. Evacuation Day. 1776, the Irish Catholics were finally able to celebrate their patron St. Patrick, where they couldn't under the Church of England, the King's Church. So I don't take that for granted. If you notice, I have my ashes on. It is Ash Wednesday here. And I value that freedom of religion and freedom of speech that we have in this country. And I recognize our Cuban Americans that I've met here seem to appreciate that. So even though that the Miami community is so disassociated, there's a lot of demographics that don't descend upon Miami. I don't feel like we have so many Asians like I've lived among around Boston, DC. They're obviously all over San Francisco and LA. We don't really have too many Asian cultures here. We also don't have,
we did though.
A third of Boston is Irish heritage.
We had a large Hong Kong population. A lot of people who fled Hong Kong before the handover by the Brits back to the Chinese back in like 1996 or so.
Right.
So what had happened is that a lot of them fled over. They went to Vancouver because of the Commonwealth. Remember, the UK was controlling Hong Kong.
Yeah.
So they ended up there. They went elsewhere. But Miami had a real strong contingent of Hong Kongers.
Gotcha.
I worked with some of them. They had been executives.
Hence maybe Brickell City Center.
Well, and Swire Properties had been coming from
exactly.
Hong Kong as well, but they came before that. I was like 79, 1980. Basically came in. That's a group that owns Cathay Pacific.
Okay.
So they came in. They had acquired a bunch of dirt, man-made island called Brickell Key. Bought a bunch of dirt. Well, it's called Clawton Island, but there were some condos put up called Brickell Key.
Mandarin.
So if they bought most of that, they then followed suit with something called the Brickell City Center. But you have large Malaysian investment too with Genting.
Well, if I can get
Genting's
back
there.
to Cuban Americans and South Americans and Latin American culture, Florida, Miami in particular, has been a draw for decades.
I would say Miami only.
Correct. So, and the email that you didn't get this morning, it's very Miami specific as opposed to Broward, because another interesting thing that the book talks about, and Spanglish is the thing in Miami.
It's actually a dialect. There's a professor. no, honest to God.
But I mean, Spanish or English
Oh.
are interchangeable, and nobody's necessarily judging the other as much. You can be super professional or not in either language here, as opposed to other parts of our country.
I mean, on the street, you're speaking Spanish or Spanglish.
A lot, yeah.
In the courtroom, you're speaking English.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, when I got here,
or in
the
my
90s,
industry, I'm pleased.
Yeah.
So
when I got here in the 90s, though, people had bumper stickers that said "Last American out, grab the flag,"
interesting.
and it tended to be more Broward County, because what happened is you had the white flight. You had people leaving Miami-Dade County, going into Broward, and then continuously, as it was cheaper in Broward, then many of them ended up in Palm Beach. And then you always know when a market's booming, because you have people from South Florida who are moving up to North Florida. They're moving different places. Part of it is the economics. The other part is potentially the cultural aspect. So very diverse community.
There's a play that I'm going to attend this week before it leaves. It's been performing a month on Lincoln Road at the Colony Theater, and I think it's called English Only. And it's about the 1980s, after the Cubans moved in. And so I'm going to have you touch on some of this, but what I've recognized in my 9 years here is each time that Venezuela, Argentina, Chile, a couple of years struggled, they flock to Miami. Typically, it's like the post-World War II brain drain. So the scientists, the doctors, the people with money and influence can leave those countries, and Miami's attracting that international wealth.
Safe haven.
And then of late, the last 5 years, when I meet people in my industry, commercial, or just even in public, and if I hear that they're from Chicago or New York or LA or California, what have you, I can't help it. After a year or so, I'm just like, oh, you're a political refugee. And sometimes they would.
Yeah, but that's more of
what I'm talking about.
But that's more of a common occurrence, or a recent occurrence.
Correct. That's why I say the last 5 years.
Yeah, last 5 years, 100%.
There's a slow trickle from those communities. Maybe tax is political. So if there's no income tax in the state of Florida, or if your school is shut down, your children can't, or if your office is shut down, and sometimes it's interesting to catch who's awake and says, "Oh yeah, you're right." Because we don't think of political refugees interstate. We think of it from other countries under war-torn. Well, guess what? If it's InfoWars or what have you, and you're being told one thing while Governor Newsom is doing the other, or Justin Trudeau is doing the other, like, hello, truckers shut down, but then I'm going to go vacation over here, or whatever it is, right? So, long-winded story, Peter, on politics, the floor is yours.
Yeah.
Tell us, sum it all up in 5 or 10 minutes. What do you got for us?
Well, generally speaking, when I got here, I registered as an NPA. That's effectively an independent. NPA. I've always been registered.
Non-political, non-party affiliate?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would tell anybody.
As a journalist, that might be smart.
Yeah.
If you ask me.
Yeah, you had to be. You couldn't come out one way or another. But I would tell everybody, register as an independent. Just register as an independent. Why? Because it's all the marketing, all of the Palantir stuff that's going on with the data and the targeting and stuff like. Just register as an independent. Make your own decision. I was one of the people. If you remember, they did a documentary. Billy Corbin did a documentary, and Alfred Spellman. I think it was called 526 Votes or something.
Yes, I heard about that. That was 7 years ago.
Yeah, that was like Al Gore versus Bush. It came down
to the year 2000, and Ralph Nader had interjected and.
I was one of the Ralph Nader
Al
votes.
Gore should have. I've always, as an independent,
I voted for it. I thought
I've leaned that way often too.
I went with Nader. I voted for McCain. I voted for Obama. I voted for everybody. I'm chasing whatever they're sort of all about. But you know what I'm chasing first and foremost? Fairness.
No, I agree.
If I see something unfair, that's when I really start to get excited about it.
Well,
which is one of the reasons.
Before we run away from the 526 votes, is if everybody of our generation, or if you're younger, and you need to look this up, Hanging Chad was a big thing 6 months or something,
especially like Palm Beach County
in Florida.
Right? You had the punch.
So your vote can matter, and they claim the reason why he named it 526 votes because that was the difference between Al Gore, who invented the internet, And you're kind of like the Tallahassee mayor, like, but look, so, you know, what was the other part I was going to say? Hanging Chad.
You had the Hanging Chad. Yeah, you had a bunch of
was an
people in Palm Beach
issue.
County who
Oh,
voted
The
for-
Swamp. The Swamp is Michael Greenwald, his book from Washington Post 20 years ago. You don't know The Swamp?
No, I haven't read
Okay,
The Swamp.
so
I'm not a
it's a-
political creature.
No, it's not
Yeah.
specifically political. It's
Okay.
a lot of real estate history, cultural history, but The Swamp is, go look this book up.
I'm going to add it on my
I think
list.
the name is Michael Greenwald, a Washington Post journalist.
okay. Sounds good to me.
from 20 years ago.
It's nonfiction.
Keith Darby had referenced it to me. Yeah, I used to have a business book club. We're going to restart it among some other tasks too.
Okay.
But yeah, so The Swamp would be a very important read for you. But continue on with that era and the whole political climate that you want to sum up in 5 or 10 minutes, bouncing wherever you want to go.
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty simple. Miami is a safe harbor. Miami is for the longest time. The reason it exists is because it gives you the transportation hub, the logistics hub. It's as simple as
Ports,
that.
airports, and seaports here.
Whether it has to do with Pan Am, doing seaplanes.
We're like number 1 or 2 airport in the country in terms of numbers.
Although international
50 million or something.
But international passenger traffic's down. It was down last year. First half of the year, we're waiting for the final numbers to come out. So, but it's always been international oriented. And then from that international orientation, then you get the other areas that grow and benefit from it. Traditionally, if you're coming from the Midwest, you're going on the west coast of Florida. That goes all the way back to a guy called Carl Fisher. This guy is the one who made a ton of money creating a headlight technology. Got it patented, sold it, sold it to some industrial company, then turned around, put money in the Indianapolis 500. He comes down here. This guy was a gearhead, if you will, was involved with the Lincoln Highway, which goes from the East Coast to the West Coast up north. He's the one who comes up with the Dixie Highway. He pushes it. Dixie Highway ultimately
Route 1
becomes, and they bring it down both coasts, and it's all meant to bring it to Miami-Dade County or Miami Beach in particular because they wanted to sell dirt. They wanted to sell property. So this whole game has always been about selling real estate.
1910s?
Yeah. I want to say Tamiami Trail opened 1928.
Okay.
1928, they finally connected the two pieces because they had to go through the Everglades. The irony of that is that George Merrick, who has Coral Gables and front-loaded, and
100th anniversary.
he put all of his entrances for Coral Gables, he put them on fronting Tamiami Trail, which runs east-west. So the northern boundary of Coral Gables. Market was over by September of 26, and Tamiami Trail didn't open until 1928 because of delays. So this is how
including
it works.
hurricanes.
Two
of them.
Yeah. So this is how it all comes together. It's all about taking the sunshine to get people down, making them feel comfortable. Back in the day during Prohibition, Volstead Act, Carl Fisher was rum running. He was bringing in his own rum. You weren't supposed to have booze, but one of the things they offer, you can come down here and don't worry, they're going to look the other way, just like today. If you're coming here for adult entertainment, and you can perceive that however you want, you come into Miami. If you're going for like the mouse and the family entertainment, you're going to Orlando. If you're risk adverse and you're older, you're going to Palm Beach County. And Broward County kind of fits in the middle because that's the servants basically that catering to Miami-Dade County and catering to Palm Beach County. So a lot of it kind of is very similar, but it's
Really cool.
always the same story. Always the same story. You know, we went through the peso devaluation against the U.S. dollar, Argentinian peso against the dollar. They decoupled.
What, this year or last year?
No, this is not 2002. 2002. Okay. And then what happens? We get this whole contingent of Argentinians settling in here up around 71st Street in Collins. We go through the situation.
Their peso was strong?
The Argentine peso was par with the dollar. So you could get a peso or a dollar. They decoupled. I happened to be in Buenos Aires at the time. I was trying to buy up leather. They have a lot of leather products.
I got to interject for a second because one of my favorite clients, wonderful, sweet gentleman from Argentina, and developer.
That's what brought the Argentinians here.
So I'm wondering,
a big way.
I got to ask him. I represent his retail listing on it's underneath a hotel in South Beach that he built out, but he started as co-developer with a French firm that built the Mary Brickell Village retail, massive mall. So I bet you it was around that time. I got to ask him that history. That's amazing. So, I'm sorry, continue.
No, just like the whole Cuban migration. When they came here, when Fidel Castro took power, They came here.
59-ish.
Yeah.
60.
So, and then again in 1980 with the Mario boat lift
right.
aspect. So there's always a wave of
Mario
people.
boat lift is
Yep.
when he released a lot of prisoners and some
Yep.
mental institutions, over 100,000 of them, right?
There's
Maybe more.
always, I think it was north of
Was it
150 or
3
something.
weeks?
Yeah, it'll all be documented. No, I think it was over the course of 6
audience
months.
doesn't know that. Look
Yeah.
that up.
Yeah. So, but the point is, there's always a wave. People always come here for a safe harbor.
Yeah.
It's a safe haven. They get interconnected, assimilate to the area, and then they typically go elsewhere. What I always say is,
somewhat.
well, what I say is, you
We
come here.
congregate in pockets.
Yeah.
Humans do that.
Yeah. So, and you come here the first year, if you got money, you're partying like a rock star. Second year, you got to get serious and move away from it. And by year 3, if you haven't moved away from the partying, you're going home to rehab or you're going to prison. So if you're here 4 years, then you're legitimate. And what I would tell you is this whole thing you're talking about since the pandemic, that is a political migration that occurred. You brought a lot of people from, let's call it, it was interconnected, and now it's starting to really sort of lean hard towards the Republican aspect. And because now, don't get me wrong, Florida is a Republican state, but it was not long ago though.
Not always.
Not long ago. You had a guy called
correct
Lawton Childs. You had Jeb. Yeah, Lawton Childs was
Jeb Bush. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he was followed by Jeb Bush. You had different governors. So this is just another wave. This is people coming from that I've seen. We had the Argentines come. You had the Cubans come. There was the Haitian movement when everything was going bad in Haiti. You had
When's it not?
But
Sadly.
there's always these moments in time when people will flood into. You've had the Venezuelans recently.
Mhm.
Everything that was going on there.
5 years or so.
Yeah. So there's always a wave, and Miami's constantly repositioning itself, and it's always done that, and it'll always do that. Then the question is, once people are here, do they stay or do they go elsewhere?
Mhm.
So these booms and busts, this is who we are. And if you want to get a great sense of it, there's a great American novelist called Tom Wolfe. Tom Wolfe did a book called Back to Blood. And his premise of his story is, at the end of the day, when you come to Miami, what Miami's all about, it's about your bloodline. It's about the Haitians stick with the Haitians. The gringos are with the gringos. The Cubans are with the Cubans. And that's really what he breaks down in this book. And it's a fantastic read. It's probably 400, 500, 600 pages. It's a great read. And I tell anybody, if you want to get overnight a sense of Miami, that's a great one to do. And I will say, though, when he was down here investigating, it was one of his last books, he hired a former journalist, used to work at the Miami Herald. And that guy had to step down because he got busted in a John ring. So which was fitting because he wanted to see all aspects of Miami. And that's really what Miami is. Miami is not going to be your hardcore conservative. Miami's all about pushing the boundaries. And because it's about pushing boundaries, it attracts, and people can mold it into whatever they want it to be. It's not hardcore. You can't do this. You can't do that. And the more that's put in place, then people simply rebel against it or they work around it. There are speed limits that are posted. Nobody drives the speed limit. Again, it's suggested, and that's really the feel of Miami. Miami is all
My
suggested.
first week in Miami, I recognized that those red octagonal stop signs must read suggestion because nobody stops at them, including city vehicles. I'm like, really? I can't believe that. But, and that's partly because I think we've got such an influx of 36 different countries without, bona fide road rules in their home countries. They just come here, and some reason the police just let it go. Not always. I do think they're a little better. But yeah, it's an interesting cultural aspect of Miami.
More than 50% of Miami-Dade County is foreign born, according to Census Bureau.
It's a young city.
Yeah,
I noticed
it's
a one or
constantly
two
changing.
generation, including like my brother and sister had chosen Fort Lauderdale years ago in the 90s, and they described how nightclubs would come and go in 18 months, and people would come and go. So professionals might, like my siblings, they each lived here about 5 years, but they recognized their friends were like in and out within a year or two. And that's not as bonding. One, I think the heat gets to people, as we noticed a few years ago when these New Yorkers flocked down during or post-COVID. And then there's first or second summer, they're like, oh, that's it. Their offices might have reopened, or their money might have dried up because their offices back home said, oh, you live in Florida now? You get Florida pay. You don't get Manhattan pay.
I had a conversation.
It is a bit of a transient American community.
But it's a sexy town. It's got energy. It'll keep you young.
I agree.
If you're 50 in Boston,
there is a fountain of youth in Florida.
If you're 50 in Boston or you're 50 in Miami, completely different perspective.
My friends are very complimentary of me back home. I lost 50 pounds. Also, the lifestyle choice, but because it's year-round good weather, and you're influenced by those around you to eat healthier and live healthier and play sports, be active rather than watch sports as we do in the City of Champions. Yeah, it's a fountain of youth. And I think that's something to be celebrated in my side projects.
As long as it's not trying to be harnessed. And that's the problem. When you try to harness it and put rules in place that are going to effectively change the vibe and the feel, that's always the risk. That's the balance that this community is sort of dealing with and will constantly dealing with. You can come here and do what you want, but you can't tell other people what to do, and that's always the push-pull.
I'm missing the harnessing, like telling people they can't have sodas in the schools, or what are you talking about?
No, I would just say if you look at the recent mayoral election,
the mayoral election in Miami with Eileen Higgins, Commissioner Higgins,
swung hard, Democrat woman, which had been primarily run by somebody who's probably Cuban American.
We're talking Francis Suarez.
Or
the former
and before that.
Oh, okay. The history.
I'm just saying there was a dramatic.
This mayor of City of Miami, which by the way
was a female.
We're 3 blocks from City Hall.
Yes.
And I applied
temporary City Hall. They're moving it.
Temporary City Hall?
Yeah, they're going to be moving it.
Well, I think we're talking about the same thing. You have to tell me about this. This is beautiful, cool City Hall right on the bay.
The old Pan American seaplane terminal.
She said a week or two ago, she's like, I'm going to put my offices downtown. She's rolling her sleeves up to be. So I didn't know about that. So temporary, what are they renovating it?
No. What they did as part of the deal with Jorge Mas is a guy whose father.
The other developer.
Yeah. Well, his father was a big leader of the Cuban American movement in terms of lobbying Congress and stuff like that. They are building Freedom Park, which is where the Inter Miami team will play.
Right.
As part of the renovation.
Soccer football stadium.
Yeah. They're building a city
consolation bronze game.
Yeah. So they're going to be building a city hall in a city area. So they're going to be vacating the office space on 2nd and the river, North Bank of the river. And they're also going to be looking to vacate the Pan American.
So they'll put City Hall over
at
with Inter Soccer Stadium.
Yeah, Melreese Park. It'll be on 37th.
Melreese Golf Course has been renovated.
The golf course was taken down.
Tiger Woods is moving to his little putt shack or whatever. The other one, sorry.
Well, I don't know what the state is of the park because it was all polluted.
It's going to be.
It was polluted and they had to remediate it. So they had to take all the dirt.
I didn't realize City Hall is good. So that's amazing because one of the attractions to our city, and this was at the real estate summit yesterday, is the in and out, the ingress egress of our Miami airport. It's quite central and it works for most people.
Well, an interesting story.
Industrial to the west, and you got the residential office to the east and south, and now you got the soccer stadium. It's world class. Interesting story, Peter. What?
Well, the interesting story about that, the only reason Miami International Airport is there, I was doing research for my Coral Gables tour, which I did last week, is Pan Am, which was doing a seaplane. They had seaplane service. Okay, so you fly in one of those planes.
Pan Am is a former,
way back in the day,
legendary airline, headquartered here, right?
I think it was, yeah. So back in the day, and then what happened is landing on dirt was becoming an issue. So Pan Am needed a field.
Wow, so that's old school.
They needed something close to Dinner Key, and by the way, they call it Dinner Key because if you left, I think it was Key Largo in the morning and sailed, you'd end up at Dinner Key.
This is Dinner Key down the street, right?
Yes, here in Coconut Grove.
When I point that way, it's literally over there.
Yeah, so it all kind of connects together. But basically, Pan Am was moving into the landing, not on dirt rather than water. Yeah. They needed a place to go, and there was a rail line called Seaboard Airline Rail.
Okay,
which ultimately would be acquired, become CSX. So it's the west side. So they needed a place to go, and they needed someplace close to Dinner Key, where City Hall is now, because that was the original terminal. And they found where the train was, so they built effectively Pan Am Field, which would, because the train, they could bring in fuel supplies, and ultimately it morphs into Miami International Airport after you got World War I, you got investment by the feds, stuff like that.
Right.
But it was all because it was close proximity. So, but at the time, it was out in the sticks. Now it's in the center, effectively, of the development of this population.
Right.
So, I mean, a lot of things make sense back then. Today, you look at it, you're like, what the hell were they thinking? But these are like some of the little small stories.
That's really cool. So one of the things, like in reading The Swamp, and I read like county publications on Miami-Dade like a couple years ago, and like I've been here 9 years and still feel new to Miami. I reckon I was back in Boston 2 years ago, and I realized, okay, Miami Beach in particular, where I live, is home to me. Whereas, every decade, your life and your family and your friends kind of change. Like my friends back home in Boston are all out in the suburbs with their families and yada, yada. And that city's changed. And as I mature, I recognize most cities change over a decade. And one of the things I learned early on, to bring this back into politics, some wild stories from Peter Zalewski here, is I lived in Brickell for 6 months before I decided, Fountain of Youth, why wouldn't I live in the one metropolis on the East Coast that has professional jobs and a year-round beach? I might as well live there. So I learned from friends that hosted a birthday party in Brickell, and someone said, Miami's a sunny place for shady people. Peter, tell me the shadiest story in real estate that you can think of regarding politics or dirty business.
Well, I mean, people come here for three reasons. One of three reasons: they're coming for love, they're coming for a job, or they're running from the law. That's the only reason you come here. It's a transient town. I don't even think somebody's legitimately here until they've been here at least 4 years. Because remember, they have to go through this process.
Like I said, I still feel new in 9. And still learning. I can't believe how much history is in this city.
I had a conversation with somebody from the United Nations one time. I was out at some event, and the person worked, and they were all over. And I was asking them about, the different, how it plays out, and how do they decide which type of employee, let's call it, where they're going to be positioned. And what he told me is they never take an established married couple and send them to Miami because of the influence around. A lot of pretty people here. A lot of sex appeal, rules, no moral compass in this town,
including, right?
Yeah. Well, so what I'm saying is, they would typically put somebody young in their career, and the same thing goes on with multinationals. You want to put somebody younger in their career here, or maybe somebody who's heading it, because it's got that vibe, that energy. Somebody who's more set in their career and their family. They're sending them to Europe, or they're sending them to like Singapore or something. But Miami's one of these, it can be a very dangerous place on all different levels. I'm not saying from a criminal perspective, but it can be a very sort of sketchy place. Probably one of the best stories, real estate related, that I can refer to. There were two brothers. It was a group that got taken down. They were called Los Miami. Two brothers from Spain. They were the ones importing, if memory serves me correct, most of the cocaine going to Western Europe. It was coming from Colombia and ultimately was ending up there. And the two brothers liked the Miami lifestyle. So they made a decision. One brother would live in, I think it was Madrid. The other one was living in Miami, south of 5th. And they were running whatever they were doing. They needed to park their cash. So they started bringing in realtors, having realtors step forward and buy units so they could park the cash as effectively straw buyers. And fast forward, there was one day where Interpol and the Spanish police, working with the U.S. government, they launched effectively a raid on both of the brothers' homes, one in Madrid, one in I think it was Madrid, and the other one in south of 5th. They go in there.
South of 5th is Miami Beach near Government Cut.
Would be, yeah.
Used to be run down, and then they
it was a no-go.
Now
zone.
It's one of the highest per square foot residential condo markets in America, if not the world.
So that was a good one. There's been other ones. We have a street in downtown Miami named after a gentleman who went to jail, convicted for financial shenanigans. All streets still named after him. So that's the type of community that we are. We have a hotel.
It's begging the question. The name?
Oh, Abel Holtz.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
I've seen the name.
Yeah. So you will go through, and he's. So you will go through and you'll see all of these stories. This is a city where everybody gets a second, third, fourth, eighth chance. It's not a city where if you live in a community and you screw up, everybody's going to know forever and ever and ever. Because there's constant churn. We're constantly churning. So the group that came down during the pandemic, they came down here and thought the trees were going to grow to the moon. And they went all in. And then Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan called them back to Wall Street, and Silicon Valley called them back to Northern California. They pay too much. If they're going to leave, unless they ride it out, they're going to get, they're going to get smoked on the pricing. We always do this. This is our hustle. You bring them in with the sun. You give them whatever it is they need, whether it be legal or illegal. You make them feel comfortable. They park their cash. The market turns. The locals take it back at a discount. And then we start it all over again. Listen, 2000, you had something called Silicon Beach. Lincoln Road was going to be this capital for venture capital and startups on the internet. Then you had privatization of Latin America. So you had the Spanish companies, all these companies moving in here because they were going to privatize Latin America. Then more recently, we had the crypto bros. They all come flooded in here. We got a statue up at Miami-Dade College across from the federal prison to representing the Bitcoin era. We always have
with the bull. That's what you're referencing.
An actual bull. Yeah.
The bulls and bears and the bull. Yeah.
Every decade has a new era of a new hustle.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's always the same. The sun brings people down here. The booze and the pretty people force you to buy into real estate.
Right.
And the trees grow to the moon until they don't. And once they don't, then you start all over again and you got to figure out a new hustle. And we've been doing it for 100 years.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you bring a lot of that stuff up. And as an office tenant rep, what I recall in my first few years serving, one client in particular had a really cool co-working concept in Manhattan. That they were young gents, 23 years old, and their mentor was the Regis director. So he was the one that took, and that was one of the first co-working. They're the ones that like really professionalized the executive offices and branded it. And he took it nationwide. So great mentor, retired young in Naples at 55. These 23-year-olds had taken over his Manhattan project called Reflex, which I really liked the brand name. I really liked these guys and I wanted to do well. And they're like, hey, we like this spot in Edgewater. And my colleague Keith and I were, hey, well, make sure you go over there. Because if Edgewater is going to be, this is 2019, and we'd advise them, make sure you stop in Edgewater in the evening and count the lights, because they were off. And if you remember, that was the condo apartment market that had boomed the most in the previous decade. Developers, people are just looking to park cash, whether you're from Venezuela, where your inflation is 8,000% or what have you. And so that smart money they would buy a condo and just sit on it. And people used to debate, well, shouldn't we charge a luxury tax for these condos that are vacant and blah, blah, blah. But so there was warnings. And the silver lining here is our last 5 years, Edgewater's filled up. The lights are on. There's a community there. And those if you rented your apartment there, it would have been $2,500 or so, which sounds like a steal compared to Manhattan or Boston. And now those might be $5,000 or $6,000. So it's interesting. There is definitely a demographic that's chosen to stay in the Miami market year round, including, summers heat up. They might go do their summer travels like a lot of people, or they might go do their 6 months elsewhere.
But understand,
they're using their space longer term.
Yeah,
and some of them are choosing to build families and raise children here.
So, but understand though, they haven't gone through a correction. We started building again since the Great Recession. So we've been on an upward trajectory.
But if you intend, if it's your forever, your starter home, and you're going to be somewhere for 5 years, then the correction might not matter as much. But yes.
So there hasn't been a correction. We had to pull back, and we were getting ready in 2018 to come back in and clean up the mess again. Okay.
Clean up the mess, meaning buy low as a vulture.
Correct, because the market was starting to collapse. Why? Because people got ahead of their skis. They always get ahead of their skis. Real estate's not real time.
This is about that era that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So be warned. There's a lot of supply and there's a lot of threats to tax the luxury landlord tax of like, Mr. Landlord, you can't leave that vacant. They do it to retail landlords all the time too.
And there was this movement by President Trump under his first administration to jawbone Jerome Powell. Sound familiar? Jerome Powell bent the knee, started cutting interest rates, and it saved a lot of people who would have got taken out. 2018, 2019. 2020 comes, everybody pulls back because of the pandemic. 2021, you don't have to wear a mask. You can work from home, and then you can go to Miami Beach and you can get on that police car and you can twerk, twerk, twerk.
I knew he was going to say that. I listened to his podcast.
So we went from 2012.
I witnessed a lot of that.
We went from 2012 and we just been upward. And what's happening now is the game's over. Now you're starting to see condo prices fall. Sales have fallen off the cliff a long time ago. Right. Now the prices are cracking. As the prices crack, we're going to go through some of these corrections. So all of these stalwarts who are here and saying, I can tough it out. I can do this. I can do that. They haven't been through a downturn. They've only experienced the tailwind. They haven't experienced the headwind.
Right.
And as that plays out.
Jenny Huertas was discussing this on your weekend podcast.
Yeah. My Jenny Huertas from CBR. She was with me back in the Condo Vulture days, and we're continuing stuff. But what I'm saying is, we haven't been. Listen, in banking, they have something called a stress test. And that became because of the Great Recession, where you have to go in there and test the bank's books for stress. This market has not been stress tested. And I would take the angle that if it is, you're not going to like the results. Why? Because at the end of the day, they're numbers. Now, single-family homes might be different, but a condo is a commodity. It's going to trade like a commodity, and all the over improvements you made to your condo because you think it's going to sell for more, it doesn't mean a thing. When the market collapses, the only thing your over improved condo does is sell quicker. You don't get a better price. It's just, okay, if I can pick from all of this crap, let me take the better looking crap. Kind of like going to.
You're all taking notes. The mathematician is at work right now. He's at the chalkboard for the Gen X crowd.
I'm not trying to piss on anybody's
no,
parade.
Not at all.
But I'm saying
we need to know this.
But back in the 1920s, when George Merrick was taking a pineapple or grapefruit
founder
plantation and turning it into what it would become, he was burning, according to a book called Bubble in the Sun, he's burning $4 million a year. $2 million of which was going towards hiring journalists to put out the spin that they want, another $2 million in advertising. We do it the same way today.
Like a Marjorie Stoneman Douglas.
Why do we have developers suddenly coming on podcasts right now? Because the market's not there. They're trying to calm the market. Why is the real estate industry changing the goalpost on what the definition of equilibrium is? It's always been 6 months, less than 6 months seller's market, more than 6 months buyer market. They've now said it's not 6 months anymore. It's 6 to 9 months. The industry knows what's coming. They are battling. If you start to see all of a sudden these developers out there, if you start to hear these great stories coming from the industry, that's because they realize what's going on. They're trying to get ahead of the curve because you got guys like me looking at the numbers, and the numbers are the numbers. So the ways they used to approach it is kind of like we were talking before this. We were talking about sports. Okay, so if you're a baseball fan, football fan, whatever, the big complaint right now is about the NBA, National Basketball Association. So back in the day, you could do what you did, and you had these great matchups. You had the Lakers versus the Celtics, and you had the Miami Heat versus the Celtics. You had all these great
Celtics versus everybody.
Yeah. So now what's happening? The viewership's falling. Why? Because it's all analytics. Everybody's chucking up a three.
Yeah.
Instead of going in there and toughing it out below the rim for a rebound.
A lack of diversity in play.
Yeah. So now it's all analytics.
Yeah.
So what the real estate,
like walks and home runs in baseball.
Yeah. So what the real estate industry doing right now is they're playing old school. Unfortunately, everybody's playing with the analytics. And this is where their approach to things is ultimately going to fall up short. Is now you can pull numbers. You can analyze stuff. And you can go to somebody like Zillow. Zillow is this group that's an advertising company. They collect information. They sell ads to people who are realtors to go ahead and be the preferred. Well, you know what Zillow did based on their data? They went ahead and they set up a private equity group. And they bought a bunch of houses. And how did that play out? It did not play out well. They had to dump it at a significant loss. So what I'm telling you is don't smoke your own stock. Your own product. So, and that's
a Miami phrase right there.
But that's too much of what kind of goes on in the industry. So I'm just saying, anybody out there looking to do real estate, best thing you do is take advantage of Florida and its sunshine laws. Sunshine laws are public records.
Right.
Do your own homework. If your mother says she loves you, check it out. This is a town of pirates. This is a town of transients. Do your own homework. And if you don't want to do the homework, understand what the risks may be.
Yeah, interesting. You said pirates literally are like 3 blocks away in the 18th and 19th century. Cool.
And there was a mythical figure. They don't know if it's true or not. Somebody called Black Caesar.
Black Caesar.
Black Caesar on an island.
He's real. But the interesting thing, it's like those that watched Princess Bride, is those pirates passed their names on. So one reason why it becomes mythical is the next guy that inherits the ship. You know this?
No, I don't.
Yeah. So a lot of these pirate names, there's 2 Black Caesars.
Okay.
Yeah, because the one that must have died or whatever, then the next guy takes over. So if you watch The Princess Bride, what's his name? The Dread Pirate Robert, right?
I never saw that.
What, brother? Come on. You
I saw
call
Black
yourself
Sails.
Gen X.
I saw Black
Chicago
Sails.
kid?
I never saw the Prince.
Anyway, yeah. So Black Seas used to be like an amazing sailor out here. He's a Caribbean guy, and piracy was real, and it's now just a different format here. So let's wrap up with some prognosis on a political scale. You mentioned having lived in Minnesota at one point. Minnesota is a hot topic nationwide, worldwide, for many reasons. If you ask me, when you have these sanctuary cities and you stand down and no longer cooperate, I started paying attention to politics in 2001, September 11th, like a lot of people. And I was like, oh, I can't sleep on this anymore. And I started paying attention to journalism and reading between the lines and what's propaganda and what's omitted from truths, and listening to what's the Patriot Act and this and that. So we have to be aware as American citizens, as humans, as consumers, as voters, and as business folks. So you've got Minnesota imploding, whether it's the scams on the luring centers, there's a missing N, that's been going on at least a decade under the politicians' watch. And that's happening nationwide, Massachusetts and California and everywhere beyond. And that's probably the tip of the iceberg on whatever other scams. It doesn't have to be children's centers. That's an issue. Obviously, the immigration customs enforcement's been around 45, 50 years, I believe, with similar operations that Obama. I lost my house in Rhode Island, and I realized just recently that I didn't think anything of it when we knew then, 2011-ish, I couldn't have, my tenants, I had a 3-family, my tenants went out and bought property because the planets aligned. The mortgage rates dropped, the prices dropped, the local tenants have moved out because Obama's ICE came through and moved out a lot of tenants across 5 or more nearby communities. There's a lot of vacancy. I didn't complain. It's just that was the natural state of things at the time. And now we're watching a lot of local politics affect nationwide, whether it's shutting down a COVID 5 years ago, or Minneapolis or California with its not so, Canada, not so pro-business, not so freedom of speech, religion. Canada is an issue, UK is an issue. Will Miami continue to be the capital of the world as I see it? What do you see in the next 5 years, whether it's presidential elections, local elections like Eileen Higgins, the Democrat that replaced the Republican who famously asked, how can I help? And then he's an easy target to criticize Mayor Suarez as well. What do you see, Peter? Macro, socio-political, economic.
So first and foremost, this is a city built on trade, whether legal or illegal.
And you come with the receipts as a journalist in international trade.
Yeah. When I was a journalist, I wrote about a bunch of white collar crime, billion-dollar Ponzi schemes and
Arthur Ponzi, Bostonian, known for his banknotes back then, and then got out of jail and came to Florida and was trading land
he was selling dirt.
So
just
yeah,
send
we're
us
not
a
just
check.
using it as a term, but yeah. So yes, the Ponzi, the modern Ponzi scheme of what was the white collar crime in Miami?
It's typically white collar. Well, as this market corrects and this recession hits, if it does hit, what you're going to find is you'll find out the latest generation of scammers. Last time there was a gentleman who was running a scam, and he was raising money. He was going to be an agent for athletes coming through the University of Miami, as well as other universities. He was
pre-NIL?
Yes. And he was taking the cash, and then he was betting because supposedly he was getting great information, or he knew the market, and that went sideways. Once the economy, you had a guy called Scott Rothstein. He did a factoring company right there in Las Olas in Fort Lauderdale, north of $1 billion. So there will be a whole series of Ponzi schemes that are run down here once the tide goes out. So I don't think there's any question about that. You're probably going to have a lot of pain felt in the real estate market. A lot of people got ahead of their skis. They went ahead and they believed that the trees grow to the moon. They believe that we're the gateway to Latin America. They believe that 1,000 people a day are coming, which they do until they don't.
NPR reported 500.
Okay, so
a
it's
couple days. Well, a couple
All right, so
days.
it's-
You know,
so
I
it's
was
500.
listening. I listen to
Yep.
NPR a lot.
yeah,
and-
but this is the
but I
mantra.
also listen to what they don't share.
But this is the mantra you're always going to hear. You're going to hear this mantra, and the good thing about Miami is it's always going to be changing. Now,
So-
what I will tell you,
Forgive me, but the point that I listened on NPR, they also said that because, and back to my points about global geopolitics, especially in America and the States, because of the immigration policies being enforced now, we've lost it. What they said, 9 out of 10 of the migrants to Florida, of the 1,000, were international. I believe it could be in Miami. It sounds like there'd be a lot. If it's 1,000 people to Florida the last 5 years, and there's now 500, they said much of that 500 drop is that maybe it's the Venezuelans and Argentinians or whomever are not moving here.
or it could be people leaving.
Yeah, the net, but yeah. So continue, because I think that's really interesting to me on this macro political, business climate.
People leaving Florida makes a lot of sense, especially on the West Coast, because they got hit 2 years in a row
my gosh,
by hurricanes.
Yeah.
Wasn't last year, but that's what
Property
happened.
insurance.
That's what happened in
Nucleus
the early
is affiliated
2000s.
with
Yeah.
Global Pro Property Insurance. Yeah.
It always happens. But let's go in a time machine and let's go back 25 years.
Okay.
We're going to go back to 2000 or so. There's something called the Free Trade Area of the Americas. Free Trade Area of the Americas follows what is NAFTA. NAFTA was set up to bring together Canada, United States, and Mexico. Remove the
This
tariffs.
is Clinton era, Ross Perot,
Clinton era, yeah.
George Bush, that whole era, and
Yep.
I think Clinton pushed through.
Yeah. So the Clintons were here all the time. They were always here. They would hold their events over Vizcaya. Vizcaya is the home of Daring, Old Man Daring. And Old Man Daring had this place. He built it, ultimately turned it over to the county. County owns it, and they run it. And Ken Griffin,
It's a Gilded
billionaire.
era Mediterranean.
put up in the
like a Newport, Rhode Island mansion.
19 teens or so. So they would host everything there. And then the free trade area, the NAFTA then morphed into what would become a free trade area of the Americas, with the idea of going from Alaska to Argentina, no trade barriers. The hemisphere would all trade in amongst itself. So that was the idea. So they were kicking around the idea of where would we put what they call a secretariat, a headquarters. So you could have like a trade court. You could have all these issues could be settled one place. So one of the places being considered was Miami. The other place being considered was Panama City. So it'd be centrally
Florida.
located.
Panama City, Panama.
Panama City, Panama. Yeah, not
Florida is like
not North
sleepy,
Florida.
Yeah.
So it was going to be
Redneck
there.
Riviera.
So everybody exactly. So everybody could connect. And the big focus
By the way,
was
since we're on the politics, we're gonna get into we're gonna protect my little self.
So then you get protests. You get anarchists back in there. I think today they would call them Antifa.
25 years ago.
Yeah, you would call
Okay.
them you'd call them Antifa today. It was a WTO protest. Remember the WTO protest 25 years ago or so? So we had a bunch of them here, and there was protests in the streets. There was all kinds of stuff. You had the police on lockdown. They had a commissioner called Timoney. I think he might have been out of Boston, Philadelphia, somewhere in the Northeast. He was the cop, and you had these protesters. Everybody, they didn't want the free trade. So the hardcore left did not want the free trade because it was going to destroy everything. And they came down here and they were protesting, and their headquarters is over around 29th in Miami
Latin
Avenue
America
in Wynwood.
left? Or
No, U.S. left.
Heritage American left.
U.S. left.
Interesting.
Yeah, so they were all down here protesting against it. And all of the, I guess you'd call it Republicans, they wanted free trade. They wanted it down here because it was going to bring everything to Miami. Miami's going to be this international distribution center.
Capitalist, smaller
Yeah,
government
yeah.
type perspective.
And ultimately, one of the points is that the state of Florida refused to cave. So it was reported. Jeb Bush refused to cave, or George W. Bush, or whoever. They refused to cave on subsidies for Florida's agriculture, whether it be sugar or oranges. Brazil wanted to send the stuff up. They couldn't get it. Therefore, Brazil started falling out. You had Hugo Chavez in Venezuela take over. They splintered off. They were looking at doing other things. So we went from 25 years ago, free trade and everybody being able to interact, to today, under Liberation Day tariffs, which according to Morgan Stanley were 4% on April 1st of 2025, compared to 17% on April 3rd of 2025. We went from being pro-trade, Miami's a gateway to Latin America, Miami this, Miami that, to suddenly, let's put tariffs on everything. Let's onshore. Let's bring back
This
all
is the Fed's Trump-driven tariffs
Oh yeah, this is a Trump strategy that was put in place. So
last year.
Last year. So bring it all back online. It's fine, which is it's fine if that's the way we're going to go. But where does Miami fit in the mix if suddenly you don't want international trade, okay, and you don't necessarily want people from a certain place who are being targeted for immigration? Now, let's take that a step further. Miami Association of Realtors did a study about pre-construction buyers. What they found is 52% are coming from abroad. Of that, north of 80% are coming from Latin America. So you're going to go out there and peddle condos to people, and you're going to depend on foreign nationals for 50% of it. And at the same time, you're going to send up 50 miles due west of Brickell Avenue and 8th. You're going to set up a pop-up detention center in the middle of the swamp.
Alcatraz.
So this is what we're facing. Are we going after the international? And if we are, in terms of business, we probably should have a different strategy from a chilling effect perspective. Or if we don't want that business, we got to figure out what the hell Miami's going to do. Is it simply going to be this tourist destination for people from the United States? Is it going to compete with Orlando? And this is the crossroads we're at right now. 25 years ago, it was all about free trade. And the Democratic left did not want it. And they were protesting in the streets of Miami. They had to set up areas, quarantine, basically. You couldn't get through it. I was a journalist. It was great. We got put in hotels in downtown Miami to be able to cover it because they were restricting all of the access. And now you fast forward where we don't want trade whatsoever. And this is a city, you got 1 million square foot industrial space out in Durrell. And now what if you're not trading with the United States? What the hell are you going to do with 1 million square feet? You can only open up so many strip joints. And I say that because Tootsie's is a former BJ's. It's an industrial space that was turned into a strip joint. There's only so many strip joints you can offer. So
by BJ's, you mean wholesale club?
Yeah. Then because that's an industry that does very well down here, and because of that, they took it over and they turned into a strip joint called Tootsie's. So I'm just saying, if you're in South Florida and you're in
We've
Miami,
had millions of square feet come online to serve the Amazons and the other distributors.
Amazon had an opportunity to come here. They had an opportunity to come here 10 years ago. Yeah. They were looking everywhere. They chose, Long Island City, New York?
Yeah, and AOC shut them down.
Yeah. They could have came here. You got Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach County working together to try to get them. They didn't come here. They didn't come here then. They're not coming here now. That's propaganda that's being spun to make people feel good about it.
Yeah.
I've seen this way too many times.
Right.
This is why they want you to buy in the rumor. You hear this rumor and you're like, oh my God, I got to get in. Mark Zuckerberg's coming. All these people are coming.
Right.
They've always come. Watch and pay attention to who's spinning the yarn.
Right.
Chances are it's a sell side person.
Right.
And that's the only thing as a journalist, still in my mindset and the way I operate, that's what I see. And I'm just like, but it's like the gentleman who set up Sarasota, Ringling Brothers with the circus people. What is this quote about a sucker born every?
Yeah.
This is what makes Florida. This is how and why we're able to do that. This is why every 10 years we kind of change who the vibe is.
Right.
Whether it was the Argentinians coming in, whether it's the Venezuelans coming in, whether it's right now it's the political right coming in. They're all coming. They come in waves. As long as they come and they spend money, I'm happy.
Right.
I'm happy. But I don't like when they speak out of both sides of their mouth. Now, if Miami is being forced to change right now and we need to turn away from trade, we need to turn away from globalization, that's fine. But what the hell are we going to do? We're going to peddle condos to people from the United States, people from Cleveland. We're going to peddle condos to people in Peoria, Illinois, where Rivian is. I mean, who exactly is your target market? And more importantly, where's the real estate industry? Why aren't they out there saying one thing or another? They put out a study saying how many people come from abroad. They think it's just going to be like subtle. People are going to see that number and just sort of consider it. So, you got a lot of interesting points. And this is another dramatic change in Miami's history. And that's the exciting part about it. We don't know how it's going to break out. We do not know.
Well, with that, I'm going to take off the hat and we'll start wrapping up. Thank you for the honest candor and education. I'm looking at it as somebody who's been on the ground for north of 30 years, somebody who loves this community, somebody who's been to more than 50 countries in the world. I've traveled a lot. I've seen a lot. I've interviewed a lot of people, and, let the politics play out how they are. But if we are pivoting, ask yourself, what is our next play? Right.
What is the next play?
I'd like to have you back to kind of review this podcast in particular and see where we're at. It might be 2 years from now, be like, hey, remember we had a chit chat and then continue to review it. So those of you that don't yet know Peter Zalewski, He is beloved in our professional community as well as his friends. So Condo Vultures, the Miami Condo Investment Club.
Miami Condo Investing Club, yeah. MiamiCondo.club, yep.
Right? So those are two, just type it in, look it up. He's got a great Substack newsletter. I get multiple notes a week and save some of them as I try to serve, like say my developer, for instance, on some ground up. He wants to build apartments, but we got to know the condo market. And sometimes there's nuggets to learn from each other. And stay tuned to Peter and me, maybe partner on some stuff in the future. Maybe I bring back my business book club, which will be quarterly. I'm looking to post these Commercial Real Estate Corner podcasts moving forward with top talents from the region or even beyond. Next week, I hope to interview an architect out of Brussels. So he's building the Rose at Wynwood.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. I met them at the Real Deal conference in November. And Peter Zalewski, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me.
Always fun, Kevin.
On to the next thing this afternoon, and wishing you all a happy Easter season. It's Advent. Celebrate your freedom of religion here in America. And if you ask me, I believe that Miami is the capital of the world because Florida is the free state, the freest in our country. Peter might want to debate that.
No, I'm with you. I agree.
I think a lot of Latin Americans in particular, including Haitians and a lot of our Eastern European friends, or which is another submarket of demographics here. I never thought that I would know or even love Miami as a Bostonian. It's been a laughable party city, but until you get here, you don't realize. And Coconut Grove is a hot spot the last 5 years in particular. And we didn't even get deep into the Bahamians. It is a bohemian culture, but the Bahamians had descended upon Coconut Grove well over a century ago. And thanks to them, they incorporated the city of Miami 128 years ago. So we're going to come back in year 130. And we're gonna talk about where we're at. Peter, you get the last word, my friend.
Miami is always changing. South Florida is always changing. This is just a wave we're going through, and there's going to be another wave in front of it and another wave behind it. We constantly change. And if you don't like change, don't come here. But if you are looking for the fountain of youth, you pretty much found it. The people around you will just provide the energy, the excitement, the incentive to kind of get involved. So ask yourself, whatever age you are, how are you acting up north or wherever you are versus how would you act in Miami? And I would just tell you, if you have any thoughts about it, come down here, but get ready for change. The city's all about change. And that's where the name Magic City comes from. It magically appeared overnight because there was so much enthusiasm and excitement about this place. So if you love this town, you'll always love this town. And if you hate this town, you're always going to despise this town.
On that, we'll see you at the Commercial Real Estate Corner next time. Thank you, brother. How does that make you feel?
The podcast?